today we have a special guest on the show, a friend of both me and Jason's, Bohan Phoenix. Welcome.
Woo!
How you doing, buddy?
Boys? I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, dude, it's been a long time.
I think so. So last time I seen you was almost 10 years ago. It's like 8 years ago.
Wow. Yeah, all right. So I got to tell a little story. The first time I heard Bohan Phoenix's name was when I was doing The Park in China, my hip-hop radio show. And my boy Wes, he was like, yo, there's this new hot rapper out here, straight from New York. You know, he's like, he's really good. Let me play you some of his stuff. And I heard it, I'm like, oh, okay, this kid's nice. You know? Wow. And then I heard a lot about him going to Chengdu, his story with 88, Higher Brothers, him, you know, rapping in Chengdu Hua. And, you know, and at that time, it was really fresh. And I was like, wow, this guy is making waves out here. So we had him on the show a few times. And, dude, he blew up in China.
Yeah.
Seriously, you were on, like, music festival stages. You were, you know, doing club shows, headlining, and, you know, getting major media. And, yeah, you know, like, having you here to tell your story with us is, you know, I think going to be a treat for everyone.
Yo, thanks, man. Thanks for all that love. I feel like in my head it wasn't all that big, but shit, like, you know, we did do a lot of cool things. So
yeah, we did.
Thanks,
because
man.
You know, people don't understand what it was like, you know, especially from our experiences as, I'm not saying you're ABC because I know you actually grew up in China, but having a Western background and going to China to become an artist, you know, like, maybe you could share a little bit inside how that felt and what it was like when you first got there.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes feel like an ABC, you know, because I did come here when I was 11, and so much of like my identity was developed here, you know. So, but yeah, going back to China was a frequent thing because my family was all there, you know, besides my mom. So every year I go back, but I would be in the family bubble, airport to the house, boom, back to the airport, back to the States. So 2015, I had ripped off a beat from Howie Lee, who was in Beijing.
Shout out to Howie.
Shout out to Howie. I rapped on a couple of his beats, put him on SoundCloud, and he was like, "Hey, if you ever have time, come out to Beijing. Like, you know, we'll do some shows." And at the time, there was a kid that also went to college with me. He was like, you know, a kid who had his own hedge fund eventually, you know. So at the time he like flew me and my homies out from New York to go to Beijing to do some shows with China, with Howie. That was my first time stepping out of the family bubble. And then like in the hutongs of Beijing, watching like in Dada, you know, doing a show, watching the kids go crazy and stuff. I'm like, oh shit, like, you know, I didn't know there was a scene like that out here.
So you could kind of say that rap was your first time visiting China. Like
in a real way.
Yeah, you'd been with family, but rap and hip hop opened up like this whole side of your own country.
Yeah, I mean, and I always talk about how crazy it is that, because the year after that, I went back with Vice China for like a 7-city tour called the Motherland Tour. And that was my first time going to 5 of those 7 cities for the first time. And I got to do it with like my best friends from New York. So music not only brought me home, you know, like back home, and brought, you know, but also was able to, it was a lot, you know, so.
You know, it's, you know, you were part of the first kind of wave of Chengdu rappers that kind of blew up. That's right. That were on the scene. And right now, obviously, Asian music, K-pop, Chinese rap actually is, you know, worldwide at this point. But like when you guys started using Chengdu Hua to rap and, you know, getting away from just standard Mandarin to rap, like when you were part of that scene in Chengdu, was it something that was like completely organic, or was it something that you was calculated, or how did that come about? And why do you think that resonates so well right now across the world?
Yeah, so I think, you know, there's actually a bunch of cats before me in Chengdu, like Chengdu Rap House. You know, they had like Fast Shady. They had a lot of people.
Yeah, like Shady, that era.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember
Shady. That's right. Yeah. And he's still one of the ones that's still doing things from that group. You know? But I think, you know, when me and Higher Brothers were doing stuff, there was a lot of just the right time, because ADA was also just putting a lot of money behind pumping out Asian rap content.
Yeah.
So unilaterally, that shined a lot of light on like other Asian rappers or like Chinese rappers. But I think like the Sichuanese dialect, which I'm also a visitor of, to be honest, because I grew up in Hubei.
Yeah.
The dialects are kind of similar, but not really, you know. But yeah, like to me, the Sichuan dialect just sounds very pleasant. You know, I think like sonically, it's almost like Japanese, the amount of tones. So I think that really lends to why that area's music got popping.
You know, it's interesting because for our audience, a lot of people think of China as just one monolithic country, right? But there's so many different styles of, as you said, dialects, different styles of music, different places where street culture and underground culture kind of thrives. You know, I and Jason probably, you know, cut our teeth in Beijing. Yeah. But over time that changed and that shifted. So for the audience that doesn't know, why did Chengdu become such a breeding ground for fresh music? I mean, being one of the furthest cities from Beijing.
Or actually, let me go in. I think I got a little hook here.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so exactly right, Jeff. And I think you could call Chengdu kind of the Atlanta of the Chinese hip hop scene, right? Like Beijing, you know, actually originally Beijing is kind of the New York, right?
Yeah.
Like we had a lot of OGs. There was a lot of like, you know, early 2000s, there was a lot popping there. But then the last like 10 years, it feels like a lot of the energy domestically and internationally has been around Chengdu. So when I think about like how the Chinese rap scene looks, I kind of feel like that's like the Atlanta, like it's carrying the banner right now in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So what's it feel like in Chengdu?
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison. But you know, I think if Jeff was asking how Chengdu became that way or how it became Atlanta, then I would say it's just the living cost of Chengdu being so cheap. You can get like a 2-bedroom for 2,500 kuai, right? That's about like $300. You know?
Wow.
So a lot of artists can move to Chengdu full-time music, and that's kind of how it became the hub of hip-hop in China, kind of. That's what people call it, you know?
Right.
Like, yeah.
It's become that, and it's amazing because like Jason was saying, Beijing is like kind of the OG place where everything started.
People's out of there now, though.
Everyone's gone.
Yeah.
It's too expensive. You can't
It's
live there as an
expensive. It's, you know, it's a little too close to everything else.
Yeah. Well, it's the capital city. Everyone knows that.
Yeah.
So I guess it shouldn't be surprised that Chengdu is considered part of the West Coast of China.
Right.
It's so far from the powers that be. So it has and it's like you said, it's much cheaper to live there.
It used to be called Amsterdam.
I know, Chengdu Citadam, right? And I mean, if our audience probably doesn't know, but when you do go to Chengdu, it feels like a different world than anywhere else in China. The youth culture there is so poppin'. The street culture, the fashion culture, the music culture, and being there. Now, when you first experienced it, because you've been between New York and between Chengdu and all of China for that matter, was it a shock? Was it a reverse culture shock when you first arrived in China?
I mean, when I first arrived in China, I mean, it's hard. It wasn't a reverse culture shock. It wasn't a culture shock in any way because I was visiting every year. Okay. But it was a culture shock when it came to the music. So yeah, I mean, like, it was my first time seeing mad Asian people with dreads. You know? Like, and this is like 2016, 2015. Like, I think there just wasn't that much of Asian people with dreads back then. You know, like that was like a culture shock, and also like how swagged out everybody was, and how like just in sync everybody was with the energy of like being out here. I'm like, how did y'all learn all this? You know, like their swagger, the way they talk, the way they like do their hands gestures, everything, you know, like it's so on point.
Got rapper hands.
It's so on point, you know, like.
Okay, so that's an interesting topic because we've discussed this before on the show about Asians and black culture and rap culture and appropriation and all that. Do you feel like the Chinese audience understands hip hop?
I think the Chinese audience understands hip hop in the vacuum of China.
Okay,
in its
explain
own
that.
in the own context. I used to get really tight because when I first got back to China, I was bringing so much ego from being in New York. You know, I'm like, oh, y'all don't know what the real hip hop is. You know,
Yeah, that's New York energy.
Sure. I know better. But then, like, at one point, I realized it would be weird if the energy and the scene in China was like New York, and it was like, like, of course, it naturally grew in its own thing, you know.
Yeah.
So I think the kids out there understand hip hop in the exact, in as much as they could understand hip hop.
Right.
You know, like in the vacuum of China, unless they got to like spend some time in Brooklyn with a bunch of local rappers and shit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I remember because we've talked before and you shared stories about like, especially, you know, 2020, 2021, right? Black Lives Matter, Stop Asian Hate. Like you were really vocal. You're really vocal about your experiences and about how like you've seen people connect between cultures and also misunderstand or misappropriate cultures. And I remember you brought friends, right? You brought American friends over to China and introduced them to the scene there. And what was that like? What was it like bringing your homies from America to China?
Honestly, that was such an eye-opening moment because they did not trip about none of the shit that everyone else is tripping about. Like I, out of the 4 bandmates I brought, 2 of them were black, you know, like. And whenever they saw people with dreads or like people that was like, you know, in our terms like acting black or they were like, yo, that's dope. Like it's crazy that they love our shit all the way out here, you know, like how did they even, like I remember my boy Ralph was like, yo, his dreads is nice. It's like my homegirl, he's like,
how they get that Chinese hair lock up?
Exactly. He was my homegirl can't even do it like that, you know, like. And I remember we were in Wuhan at this festival that was built into a water park, and they had a dreading station where people pulled up and they just sat down and got their hair dreaded, you know, like, yeah, they thought it was fascinating, you know, and that was like a moment for me too. I'm like, yo, like, who am I to like be out here, you know, and also like, again, intentions, you know, like. I think that's important.
And how were your like your black band members, your buddies that you brought with you? How were they received in China? Because I know there's we get a lot of comments.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about culture. We talk a lot about China and America, Asians and America. And one comment that always comes up is, oh, you know, China's so anti-black, or oh, you know, like these Asian countries, they're super racist too. From people who've never been there. But their expectation is that East Asian countries are really xenophobic, and it's, you know, what was it like for your buddies in your experience when you brought them out?
Yeah, so my aunt in Chengdu, when she knew that I was living in Brooklyn, she would ask me like, oh, is it dangerous? You know, I heard it's a lot of black people in Brooklyn. And so it was curious to me. I'm like, where did she get this information, right? Because she's never been to the States. She's never been around a black person.
Right.
So it had to have been through whatever media, you know, she's picking this up, right? Okay, so then me and my friends go tour in China, in Chengdu. We're all crashing at her place. Ralph is like Haitian, 6'3", 280 pounds, and his underwear laid out on the couch 7 nights in a row, you know, like. At the end of it, my aunt literally goes, wow, 好喜欢黑人啊. I love black people, you know? And I was like, that's so interesting, you know, because before that you were saying like, I gotta be careful because you think they're dangerous and all that. And I think it's almost understandable for people who have never been around a black person to have prejudice, to have like these made up things that's aided by other things. But like if you're in America and you're still on some racist ass time, you know, like then that just like, you're just that kind of person.
Well, I kind of see a lot of different comments. Some people like you, that your experience was some black people go to China and go, wow, look at they're doing dreads. It's amazing. Some of them, I see comments like, oh, yet again, they're stealing our culture, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And my argument is always the fact that hip hop has permeated across the world into unlimited cultures at this point is actually a form of soft power.
Yeah,
it is.
Totally.
It is a culture that's been able to speak to so many youth cultures across the world that they're getting a glimpse into black culture that they haven't seen, like you were saying, in the media, in the movies, in TV, etc. So this form of soft power actually does a lot for cultures, and K-pop is experiencing the same thing. Actually, the fact that they actually took Western pop music, made it their own, and now is, I don't want to say infiltrating, but promoting the K-pop culture across the world. They're able to, there's more Korean restaurants being open, more K-towns everywhere, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like this, this cross-pollination, this free trade of cultures is actually mutually beneficial to everyone. Now, Bohan, have you ever experienced that in New York?
Wait, hold on, but like, I just want to comment on that still.
Yeah, please.
I agree with that, right? I think Wu-Tang's the first Asian rappers alive, right? Right, like, so, but in addition to that though, like for the people that say stuff like, oh, there we go again, another person, stealing our culture. Yeah. They have a right to feel like that. I think like I think what's missing there is communication, right? Like if that person got to talk to that person where it's like, yo, so why are you doing this? Why are you stealing our culture?
Right.
Then there's a communication open, and maybe you find out, oh, like they didn't even, they never had the information or the tools. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think a lot of times, like people, like they may appear to be, one way or another, but I think everyone is just validating how they feel. But the only reason things go wrong is we don't communicate how we feeling. Like.
And have you communicated with your homies back in New York before you or after you came back?
I mean, I've asked them that. I was like, yo, like, has it ever felt that I was culture appropriating? Especially like
culture vulturing.
Especially like during like the BLM movement when that was a big topic. They're like, bro, like we've known you forever. The intent. We see that you love this. And like he's like, we're black. You're bringing us. You always hire us in shows. You're taking us overseas. It's like this is a brotherhood. Because of music. The only reason you're Asian and I'm black and we're friends is because of music. It's because of this shit. Like, and like that was like clear enough for me. Like, and that's the thing. It's like I'm not out here to please everybody. Like I love what I do. Like when I did martial arts, there was black people in my dojo. I wasn't like, what the fuck are y'all doing here? Why y'all trying to steal our culture? It made me feel proud to have them there.
And I know you sometimes identify as feeling ABC, and obviously we both are, and we've all lived in China. Now, I almost feel like we're considered third culture kids. There's a term like TCK, meaning that we're not completely ABC either, nor are we completely China either, although we've lived there. Now, as being an artist there, you and I were also artists there, you being an artist there, did you feel fully accepted by the local community?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Jin has gone back and done the same thing. There's a lot of rappers who've done this.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I think the fact that I've been able to go back and tour pretty much every year says yes.
Right.
Because how big the market is, there is always a pool of people that will gravitate towards anything that's like halfway decent. You know what I mean? That's one of the benefits about that market.
Yeah.
And no, because I see comments all the time, people being like, oh, Bohan couldn't make it in America, so now he's back in China.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like, or, Bohan, is doing show with, whatever, Marshall or AP, but he only has 11,000 views on his video. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm flattered y'all went and looked up the video counts and all that, But no, for sure, like I think what you were speaking to earlier, like this idea of 2 for 1 for here, 2 for 1 for home. Yeah. It was something that I wrote about extensively in my music, like overseas, 3 days in Chengdu. And it got to a point where it went from like a conflict to like a blessing. Like, oh shit, I get to have both perspectives, And that's kind of how I make peace with it today. Right. But I still, but like there are times like I'm still very much, like when I was back home in Chengdu, my aunt was like, "Oh, you're President Trump," I'm like, yo, what do you mean my president? But she's technically right because I'm American. Yeah, that is my president.
That's true.
So And again, like for example, like until COVID, I never thought of myself as an Asian American or Chinese American. I was just like a Chinese person living in America. I didn't want to deal with none of that.
Yeah.
But then when I saw like people like, you know, getting hurt and shit, there was something inside. I was just like, okay, I think I need to own up more responsibility because I am Asian in America now. You know, like, so.
Well, go ahead.
So speaking of that, I know you put out the new record, right? Great Wall of America.
Yeah.
And you were telling me beforehand that you're kind of shifting your perspective, right? Like in terms of like some of your creative output, you're going to be putting out some records that speak to a lot of your experiences here in America, as you know, whether it's Chinese American, Asian American, you're speaking to a lot of what our communities have gone through here.
Yeah.
What's underlying that? Like where does that new sort of like creative energy come from?
So I had a bunch of like song concept and ideas. Great Wall of America, One Child Policy Theory, Model Minority Myth, Black Jade, Fried Chicken and Dumplings, Yellow River Flow. I had all these like ideas and titles that was just like very symbolic. But you know, when I had these like a year and a half ago, I was like, oh, these are dope, you know, like, but then the next day I looked at it, I was like, who's asking for this? You know, who's asking for a song, Great Wall of America? You know, so I shelved it. And then I was in China, you know, I'm back in China and I'm trying to figure out like how do I fit in here? And I don't. You know, I try to go and rap at China, right? I'm like, my Chinese is the worst, so what do I have to lose? Let me just go and try it out. You know, I put out like a full Chinese album. And then like I realized all of that was avoiding of doing the hard work of coming back here and like following the original dream of like, yo, throwing my name in the hat for being one of the first like Asian rappers to win a Grammy. You know, so, you know, circled back here, you know, and then realized, okay, maybe no one is asking for this, but like these are interesting to me, you know, these concepts. So I just started pinning them out, and they came quicker than I expected. But even now, as I'm pushing these songs, I'm asking myself again, like, who the fuck is asking for this? You know, like I'm seeing other people putting out records, having fun, bang bang, you know, fucking hoes, and fucking, you know, like, and I'm like, Great Wall America, you know, like. I know. But you know,
it's difficult, right? Because it's difficult to try to like almost detach from the identity of being Asian or you know your experience.
Well, but I grew up, but I grew up on so much. All the rap that I grew up on was commentating. You know, on like shit. So it's the only thing I know how to do, and I just happen to be Asian. You know,
there is a rapper that is kind of blowing up right now, Hanuman Kind, right? The Indian guy. Yeah. You know, he's like, I'm not an Indian rapper. I'm a rapper who happens to be Indian.
For sure.
You know, he always says that. And, you know, like, of course, there's references to his Indian culture in his raps.
For sure.
You know, but he's largely just, I'm just an artist. Don't look at me like that.
But he very much, like, sells himself like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I didn't even know he was from Texas. You know, like,
exactly.
You know, like,
the Big Dogs, right? The music video?
Yeah.
Super Indian.
I thought he was some slumlord kid, you know? I mean, like...
But I think he's riding that wave in that balance, at least, in a way that we can kind of study.
For sure. No, I appreciate it. Like, and all that to say is like, I fucking love what he's doing, you know, like, but it's very much like owning his heritage, you know? So while I understand, like, we're out here, but like, yo, don't label me a rapper. I'm an artist.
Right, sure.
But, you know, at the end of the day, I'm a fucking Chinese rapper, you know, like, so.
So here's a funny question. So you were in China for basically 10 years. Until 8 years before you came back, right?
Yeah, something like that.
When you came back and now you're full on America being an artist, have you noticed a change in America at all?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like America is always like, yeah, for sure. You know, I mean, like just the rounds of presidents.
Okay, right.
Right, like the also. When I left the States in 2016, 2017, there definitely wasn't this big Asian American movement, or like there wasn't all this like dope Asian American shit, or like there wasn't like
a podcast like this.
Yeah, May wasn't Asian month. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so things have shifted. Has it shifted for you in the sense of your music then? And pushing it out and being more accepted because of the K-pop wave or because of the 88 wave or anything like that?
You know, I think inevitably I've been benefiting from all that. You know,
yeah.
but like I think in the beginning that wasn't the goal.
Okay.
But it definitely made me lean into it once I realized that was the easier way of getting attention. But I think that also became a trap too. You know, like leaning into that easy attention too.
Because there are those people now, you know, I don't want to say white people, just foreigners who used to be on the Korean hip hop wave, and now they know Chinese hip hop is the next thing. So they want to be like the first movers.
Yeah.
You know, they want to be on that.
Yeah.
You know, so there is a market, you know, interestingly enough, for this type of music here. Now, does that mean you're gonna start rapping in Chinese here, in Chengdu Hua here,
Right.
or?
I mean, for me, like I actually went from being half and half with the songs, right, to like now fully focus on the English.
Okay.
Because like again, like when I first started, you know, try to get any eyes on my music in New York, I was rapping strictly in English, and nobody gave a fuck until I threw in some Chinese in there.
Yep.
Right.
You know, like, and then so I leaned heavy into that, but then I couldn't get like a song. I couldn't get to any point in the end of a song unless you understood both languages.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, okay, now I'm switching it up to be exoticizing. You know.
Is mainstream hip hop media accepting of Asian rappers? Like, can you get on Sway? Can you get on?
I think that's a great question. I think if they were talking about the lack of representation in Asian hip hop in America, tell me somebody that's really good. Tell me somebody that's good enough that deserve to be on that shit.
Okay.
You know, tell me somebody that's good enough that can win a Grammy. That you know, in competing with Doechii and Kendrick and shit. If not, back to Kendrick again. On his album, he said, "My last LP, I tried to uplift the black artists, but there's a difference between black artists and whack artists." You know, and I think with all this like Asian American movement shit. Yeah, there are a lot of people just supporting shit just because it's Asian, and I think that's in long term wise that's damaging.
Right.
If it's not good.
I do see that dying out though. I do see like, and I think that this is a product, right, of we've got more people going into it. There's more stuff being created, which means that I think the floor, right, for what people are willing to support, what people want to support, it's not enough anymore just to say, oh man, this is an Asian American project, or this is an Asian project, even this is a Korean project, whatever. Like, people have a standard now, and if it doesn't live up to that standard, they're like, dude, we've got 3 others that we can back now.
Well, it's funny, right? Because is the Eminem of Asian rap going to be a Yao Ming or a Jeremy Lin?
Right.
How do you mean by that?
Is it going to be someone who is born and bred in China, who blows up, and people are like, oh man, you know, whatever, I can't understand it, but that flow is sick and I like it?
Or is it
going to be someone, a homegrown talent, ABC wise, or someone like you here who breaks through a la Jeremy Lin or any other?
Yeah. I think about that all the time. And I honestly don't know, right? Like, I actually asked ChatGPT this the other day.
Okay.
I threw a bunch of names in there. I was like, I threw a bunch of names in there. And they said, you know, who has the highest chance to win a Grammy? And the answer came back as one of the options I gave it, which was Audrey Nuna.
Okay, yeah.
Which I fucking love, you know, like I think she's so interesting as an artist, you know. But yeah, again, like, I think until we have what that looks like, we don't even know. And like, and that's the thing, it's like, you know, right now there's like 2 young cats popping, right? Contrast and Eric Repritz, right? Like, and I love their sounds, like a lot of energy,
really
a lot of, but like they're just bringing energy, you know what I mean? Like, and like, it might not be like what I identify with right now in my you know, phase with music, you know, but I love their energy. But it's like, you know, you look at Eric has got this kind of like a bad boy image going on, right? Like, and you look at Contrast, he's got this like kind of hood bad boy image going on. And I'm not saying image as in it's fake. I'm saying that's just, you know, how they present themselves. The brand, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, is these the only versions of like kind of like counter, you know, like, okay, we're Asians, but let's show them that we're not what they expect of us, you know? So let's bring these kind of, like, is that what it takes for us to pop off, you know, to have like really visually like provocative, you know, stuff?
You know, it might, right? Because to have a strong brand, I'll give you another example of an Asian rapper who kind of broke through, like Rich Brian.
Yep.
You know, when he first came out with his first video, he was in a yellow, I think it was a yellow fanny pack.
Yep.
Right.
Polo shirt.
Fanny
pack.
Yeah, but he drops the N word in that, right? He's called Rich Chigga, right?
Yeah,
he had a million fan base from his memes.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, what I mean, I think that's a little different. You know, like, and he had 88's money.
Right.
You know, fucking Sean Miyashiro. You know, like. Other than that, like, yeah, sure. You know, he was like the first one.
Right.
You know?
Well, you know, let's go through the list.
Yeah.
You know, and get your opinion about them.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So he was one of them.
Yeah.
If continuing with the whole 88 thing, like Higher Brothers, you have like a deep relationship with them.
Yeah.
Right.
And they worked in the U.S.
Yeah. He introduced him to 88. By the way, I'm gonna let that be known.
And I'm a fan of all of their music. You know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, right now, like, if we're talking about that Grammy spot, what that looked like, you know, it just feels like we don't have that yet, you know, like.
What about Dumbfounded? What do you think about Dumbfounded?
I mean, you could ask Dumb himself. He's not going that hard in music. You know, like if he put all his like mind into music, you never know because he's fucking genius with it.
Well, his freestyle battles were really great.
Insane. And also Safe.
Yeah.
Safe, that song in that video.
Yeah, Safe
is
really
insane.
Good. But there were some Asian battles back in the day on YouTube. I remember one of them.
Of course.
Yeah. Doing a blank ass dance with Mickey Mouse hands. I remember that line so well.
Yeah, Dumb is a legend, man.
Yeah. You know? Like
Dumb and Jin, both
legends,
genuine hip hop legends.
You listen to China Mac?
I don't listen to China Mac, but yeah, I know China Mac. Like he actually hit me up to play him in a music video when he fresh out of prison. Oh shit! And I turned it down. I turned it down because at that time I had like became. You know, over the years, I became friends with Jin.
Yeah.
And they had their issues.
And they had their issues, so at the time, I turned it down.
Yeah, but they cleared that up.
They cleared that up, and like, but me and China Mac ended up like linking for a lot of his protests and stuff.
Yeah.
He was a genuine guy.
Yeah, he's straight up dude, right?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So, you know,
is our monitor still good or? Yeah. Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. But I think that the future is still bright for hip hop, Asian hip hop, however you want to call it. You know, you got you coming back. What's on tap for you coming up?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've always been persistent.
Yeah,
I've never been consistent.
Okay.
So I've been feeling like a crazy man.
Okay.
You know, it's like I've been pushing through all these years. Like I've hit my moments of luck. You know, like where like maybe some hard work caught up with some opportunity, but I've never been able to be really consistent.
Do you think that's because of self-doubt? Do you think that's because of your ideas have always been changing? Is that because of market reaction? Or maybe you're just internally you've had new ideas about who you are and what you want to put out?
I think over the years, I didn't even realize how distracted I was just trying to figure out who I am as a person. And that affected so much of my workflow. You know, now I feel way more in tune with who I am. So I feel more like I'm able to, you know, be trusting in the stuff that I make and know that that has value and I can just be consistent instead of like waiting for a piece of thing to give a result, you know.
You know, I've always said that about artists. It's really difficult to be an artist sometimes because we're always being introspective and saying, who are we? And what do I want to put out there? You know, whereas if you're just doing business, you're just trying to make money. You know, if you open a car wash, all you're just trying to make, you know, increase your revenue or, you know, be the best doctor.
And that's the thing, is like there are artists who are able to create a whole other personality and dump all that in. And then they can still have their life.
Right.
And then they can go whatever they want, imaginative nation-wise with that.
It's almost easier.
It's almost easier, for sure. But like for me, I realized over the years, I've tied myself so much with my music.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to not be so serious all the time.
Yeah.
You believed in authenticity too much. You heard Be Real and you're actually real in your creation, huh?
Yeah, no, right? I think for me, like, I was just too, it was just kind of it was kind of just the way I chose it, you know, like to like tell my own stories, you know, like. But yeah, I mean, there are times where I think about other people who have like a whole other moniker, and they create a whole world in it, like Slim Shady, right? Like, so
I've thought about that so many times. Like, all right, so I like to do everything. I like to write every type of music, but then it makes me a jack of all trades, you know, a master of none. So why didn't I just become that avatar of
Yeah.
a personality, you know, and just completely detached from that, and then understand, all right, just this is a branding moment. All right, this avatar only does this type of stuff, only wears this type of clothes, only puts out this type of social media content. You know, almost thinking like an A&R would, or the head of a label would.
Well, I think that's the funny thing, right? Because when you're a young artist, you have all these ideas of authenticity. And you want to explore your artistic and creative process. And then 15, 20 years down the line, you're like, damn, all right, bro, now let me find somebody who just wants to make money. And I could tell them, I could teach them from all my lessons. But it's like we had to go through those 15, 20 years of putting things out. Some of them worked, a lot of them didn't. To learn that lesson, right?
It's tough, man. It's tough. Do you think you could do that? Detach yourself from yourself to become that superstar artist?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I don't even want to become a superstar artist anymore.
Okay.
You know, like I think over these years of, you know, music and self-growth, like I realized, you know, that dream of 12 years old, wanting to be a famous rapper, I was just trying to like fill up so much emptiness in my, you know, like, so for me, like I love just how things are going.
Okay.
You know, like I can't imagine not being able to walk down the street or take the subway. You know, like.
But your goal is still to be the first Asian rapper to win a Grammy, right?
For sure. You know, but like I think Doechii is not like a popping celebrity like that. True. You know,
I think she
wants to
now.
be though.
I think she is now.
Yeah, but she's not that like. You know what I mean? She's not like.
She's not like a Doja Cat. She's not like a Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
True.
So I like that. You know.
Nice.
Yeah. But also, you know, I recently learned that line. Jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
The second half is, but still better than a master of one. That's the full phrase.
I like you completing that for me. I feel a little better now.
Yeah.
Validated.
Yeah.
That's right.
But isn't it interesting how like who started to just sharing the first half of that?
Yeah.
And started like marketing as like, you know, started using that like to their, you know what I mean?
Someone who was hating.
Yeah, someone who was hating.
That's the point, right? Everything's about context.
Yeah.
And we're lacking
that's what we
that.
do.
Yeah,
That's
we're
exactly
lacking
what we do
that.
here.
And that's what we're doing here. But, you know, Bohan, we wish you the best.
Thanks, man.
You know what I mean?
man.
We're really glad to have you as our
y'all.
first guest, actually.
That's right.
Oh,
Yeah,
word.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
My honor.
Exactly.
Thank you,
and,
boys.
you know, wish you luck. And then whenever you have new music,
Yeah.
put that on one of our bumpers,
man.
you know what I mean?
Say
Let
less.
everyone know. All right,
Appreciate it.
Bohan
Hey,
Phoenix.
cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers, man.
Thanks, man.
Cheers.
Peace.